Enos Esekuri is my next guest, and I'm very pleased to have him here. Enos started with me as a part of what we call Climate Champions to actually work on the development marketplace. So Enos, it's a pleasure to have you, and see if you can talk for the next few minutes and share it with the people on the webcast. So tell me, how did you get involved in adaptation work?
Well, adaptation work was something that came naturally because I had been looking at drought-related issues in different countries. This was before climate change adaptation became a nice and sexy topic. But based on some of the work I had done, reviewing World Bank projects, looking at what are the lessons we are learning in terms of managing drought and in terms of building capacity to prepare for drought contingencies, drought emergencies, I came to realize that a lot of the activities that need to be done are much more long-term in nature rather than short-term. The way most of our drought-related projects in the bank were approached was more to respond to emergencies, drought emergencies. And based on some of my analysis, this came naturally that we need to look at how countries and communities and households adapt to climate variability. And then obviously once you look at the variabilities, the natural progression then is look at the changes that are taking place actually in climate. So the linkage between climate variability signaled through droughts versus climate change then became much more interesting to me, and therefore the migration of the way we were doing things towards more adaptation rather than just looking at droughts and related climate variability impacts.
But you went further really in the sense that you had the extreme, so as you said, climate variability with droughts and floods, and you linked it up with disaster risk management. Isn't that right?
Yes, because a lot of the, again, going back to what we were doing in the bank, a lot of the resources that went either to drought-related emergencies or flood-related emergencies, whether it's in Mozambique or whether it's in Niger or whether it's in Central America or whether it's in Central Asia, was more to deal with the disasters that were occasioned by this quote-unquote climate-related or weather-related hazards. So then the question is, how do you link the kinds of disasters and the kinds of emergencies that we were dealing with the way governments, countries, and communities do their business? How do you reduce the impact of these hazards so that they do not become a crisis every time they happen, but they become a risk that could be approached with strategic ways to manage it, either through resource allocation or through preparation in terms of capacities at local and national levels.
So in many ways it's going from the short term to the long term. And Enos, you were instrumental in getting us to actually have a sub-theme which linked disaster risk management with adaptation. And there are many finalists who in fact are responding to that sub-theme. You've walked around down there and you've seen many of the finalists' displays. What are some of the ideas, especially on the links between disaster risk management and adaptation, that you've really found interesting, that you could bring into your work?
I think one of the extremely low-hanging fruits, if you will, the areas related to either drought or floods, they're kind of two sides of the same coin. And I've seen some ideas, I think a couple of them, that are focused specifically on how to harvest rainwater. Now, you can harvest rainwater during floods or during days of heavy rainfall or above normal rainfall, and then be able to store that appropriately, either for livestock use, irrigation, or domestic use, and then be able to extend the life of the community in terms of productive activities that depend on water into a period of the year or season that would normally be considered a drought period. So by doing this, you actually have a way of not only dealing with floods, but a way of also dealing with droughts, but in a manner that increases the resilience of the local community, to increase the productivity or enhance their capacities to manage their resources in different ways, because the water that is stored is not only used for productive purposes, but it's also important in terms of environmental services, because it's part of the groundwater recharge regime that is so central to the way ecosystems function in some of these areas.
Well, Inas, it's been wonderful talking to you, and also for you to share your experiences with people connecting through, especially on disaster risk management and adaptation. Thank you for your time, and I hope I see you soon. And I hope that the rest of the people joining us can in fact reflect on how do we link climate adaptation and disaster risk management together. Please send us a message, join in the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm very honored and pleased to have Victoria Tauli-Corpuz joining us just now. Victoria, you've had a long and distinguished career in many issues on Indigenous communities. Tell us a little bit about what you do and also how it links to climate adaptation.
Yes, I'm the executive director of Tubtuba Foundation, which is an Indigenous Peoples International Center for Policy Research and Education, and our main work is to help develop the capacities of Indigenous peoples in various parts of the world to claim and assert their rights, as well as articulate and push for their own concepts of and views of development. Presently, I'm also the chairperson of the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. I have been involved in the climate change issues both as the chair of the forum and also as the director of Tubtuba. In 2007, we came up with a report on the impacts of climate change mitigation measures on Indigenous peoples. And in this report, we found out that it's not only the adverse impacts of Indigenous peoples that is there, but also even the solutions that are being thought of for climate change are also causing some human rights violations on Indigenous peoples' lands and territories. So that's how we got involved. And of course, since the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change came into the picture, we also have been participating actively in these processes. So that's how we got involved with climate change.
So in many ways, you bridge the gap. Basically provide a bridge between what's happening at the international negotiation level with the people-centric solutions that are going on. And it's been a pleasure to have you here for the last 3 days when you've been looking around as all those finalists in the development marketplace. Given that they are very much from the bottom up, what are some of the ideas that you found really interesting and how that have really impressed you?
Well, you can really see a lot of ideas from the projects that Indigenous peoples have brought here to the developed marketplace, and some of these are ideas on how to further reinforce their traditional knowledge in terms of addressing the whole issue of adaptation to climate change. The other ideas are how do you also strengthen the awareness raising among indigenous peoples of climate change and develop some very concrete projects to help them adapt to climate change. And the things that I saw that I'm so impressed with is projects which strengthen the capacity of indigenous peoples to pursue their traditional forest resource management practices, to be able to use their medicinal plants, and also resuscitate and strengthen their agricultural resource management practices. I think these are very concrete practices and knowledge that should really be looked into also by the dominant society, because there is a lot of things that can be learned from this. You know, indigenous peoples were the ones who have sustained a lot of the world's remaining tropical forests today, and the way that they have sustained agriculture also in their communities is something that's important now when we are faced with the crisis of climate change.
And that's a very important message that perhaps that the world needs to actually hear. You bring in the indigenous knowledge that survived for a long time, but there's a project in there that you were commenting on yesterday, which brings together the indigenous knowledge and the more formal, what people think as formal scientific knowledge. Have you looked at that, and what do you think of that as an idea?
Yes, this is a very, very good idea, and we always believe that anyway. We don't think that only our knowledge can address the issue. We think that all kinds of knowledge, traditional or modern, should really be looked into, and you get the best from out of this and use it to address the day-to-day problems of people. One of the projects is the project on biomathematics, where the project proponent is really using both the traditional knowledge of indigenous peoples, but also mathematics to explain the phenomenon of climate change to indigenous peoples, and also to further, assert that the knowledge of indigenous peoples are very scientific, in fact. So that is a very interesting project, I thought.
Yeah, and it's sort of a nice saying in the sense that, people think of science as the form of knowledge, and this has existed for a number of years. And I think one of the messages that's coming out is really, let's put it all together to meet the challenges of climate change. And I guess to me, one of the final things is that although we think of the finalists sharing knowledge amongst themselves, in many ways they have in fact interacted with you, and I'm sure they've enriched their knowledge from you. So I really want to sort of say thank you for being with us. Thank you for taking the time to do this interview, but also share your points with the rest of the world as well. So the final word, Vicky.
Thank you very much, Habiba, for inviting me to be here. I find this a very exciting, experience, because now finally we are seeing the bank playing a role in terms of making more visible indigenous people's practices and knowledge and ideas. And I hope this is going to cross-fertilize with some of the work that the bank is doing in different countries.
And the development marketplace
and the development
partners
marketplace partners.
Thank you
very
very
much.
Joining me now is Nadim Khouri from the International Fund for Agricultural Development, or IFAD as it's better known. Welcome, Nadim, and thank you for joining us. Tell me, in IFAD, what do you do in terms of climate adaptation?
Well, in terms of climate adaptation, we basically are interested in the impact that the climate change is having already on our target group, which is the poor in rural areas. IFAD's concern is mainly on the rural economy, on rural poverty, and in particular in agriculture. So what role the smallholders can play to get growth and poverty alleviation in rural areas. And because climate has such a important impact, both on the productive side, but also on the living standards of the rural populations, we are giving this particular aspect a lot of importance.
And do you work globally, or do you work in specific regions?
We are a global organization, so we do get involved in all rural areas, but of course more in poorer countries than in developing ones.
Well, one of the most pleasant and nice way to get to know you, Nadim, is the fact that you also provided funding and are a partner for the development marketplace. So at least personally, given adaptation is my passion, I appreciated your effort in doing so. So what do you hope to gain from being a partner in an instrument like the development marketplace?
Actually, we were extremely happy to be invited, and we think that this is in the core of what we should be supporting and funding. I would say there are two reasons, and I can see already the vindication and the proof that those two objectives are being attained. One is really what success will look like. We are all often told that climate change is a matter of gloom and doom, that so many things are going to change. We're going to have to travel less, to work less, to do all sorts of things. And many times people say, well, why don't you show us what success will look like? And I believe that success will look like, for example, the 100 finalists that we have here. It's the little at community level that the projects that are trying to say, okay, we can adapt to this. We can even maybe take advantage of the fact that we have to save water so that we will be producing more per drop of water. So this image of hope that the winners are showing us, but also all of the participants, of saying we have solutions at the community level, most of them, to address issues of climate change. This is one. The second is really the focus on the small scale. The fact that these are pilots that are going to then get a chance of proving what they can do at the larger scale defines in a way what IFAD is. And so we're extremely happy to be here.
And you've picked up the word hope and positive solutions. Do you also find it exciting when you walk down there amongst all those finalists?
Absolutely. It's not only the ideas, but of course the people themselves are full of, it seems to me, of enthusiasm, of having been recognized, of already from such a large number of applicants, of having been selected as the 100 finalists. But it seems to me also of the interaction between them. Mm-hmm. They are really seeing the advantage of those kinds of networking. And I think that's another objective of the development marketplace, which is to increase the level of synergy and enthusiasm by having people who are entrepreneurial and who would like to get their ideas implemented interact between themselves. So I think it's a win-win all over.
Yeah, I think it's really exciting in some of the ideas that they have, and I'm glad that you're excited in there. My final question, in a very short way, is what do you think are some of the things that you've learned here over the last few days that you would take back to IFAD?
I think some of the organizations that I have met, we are certainly going to continue trying to discuss with them that go a bit in the institutional level on increasing the level of awareness and capability in order for entrepreneurs to be identified and developed into getting their ideas funded, getting their ideas better expressed so that we can test them at the larger scale.
And I think that's a really good point to actually bring forward in this interview and this conversation, because there are lots of hopeful ideas there. They really need to get scaled up and basically implemented in many countries rather than just the small projects that you have. So I'm very glad that you're thinking about doing that. So thank you, Nadeem, again.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to meet you after all this month, and it's a really good way of sharing with the rest of the world. So thank you.
Thank you.
Agriculture is where climate change, food security, and poverty reduction intersect. Today, we face the interrelated challenges of doubling food production by 2050, adapting agricultural productivity, and minimizing agriculture's contribution to greenhouse gas emissions while maximizing its potential to mitigate climate change. We will need substantial new resources, new ideas, and new ways of doing business to address these challenges. IFAD believes that the development marketplace is an excellent platform for scouting and collecting new ideas from diverse sources, fostering innovative solutions, and developing partnerships in support of climate change adaptation. Once the winners are announced, IFAD will seek opportunities to integrate, replicate, and scale up innovative approaches to climate change adaptation into the projects it finances. We will also disseminate knowledge and results from the development marketplace to IFAD's regional networks such as CARIANet, Feed America, Feed Afrique, IFAD Africa, and INRAP. Adaptation to climate variability has been a de facto part of IFAD's work for 30 years through its efforts to build the resilience of poor rural people to difficult conditions. More recently, in response to the growing magnitude of climate change, IFAD is integrating adaptation into most of the projects and programs it supports, more than half of which are in Africa. An IFAD-supported project in China, for example, has enabled farmers to use animal manure for energy. Using locally constructed biodigester tanks to produce biogas fuel, methane emissions have dropped and farmers benefit from a byproduct of highly nutrient fertilizer. Incomes have also risen and health improved. Additionally, millions of tons of standard coal and firewood are saved annually, resulting in large-scale natural reforestation.
Ed Canton, who's just joined me. Ed works in the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and I understand, Ed, your focus is on innovation. So welcome, because this is very different from what we've heard from the last few things.
Okay.
So tell us, Ed, what do you do, and what does innovation mean to you?
Well, I'm at MIT. I work at the Lemelson MIT program. We're a center within the institute that rewards and recognizes inventors and innovators for a couple purposes. One is to publicly show the work that they're doing and give them recognition so that that can help their own inventive careers. And the second piece is identifying these inventors and innovators as role models for younger people to excite high school students to then pursue inventive education careers in science and technology.
So how do you take it down to the school level?
So there's two main pieces of our program. Our awards program, which I manage, and for that we have a $500,000 Lemelson MIT prize for a mid-career inventor, and a $100,000 Lemelson MIT award for sustainability, which is more the focus of the reason I'm here today. And in fact, one of the past DM winners, Dr. Joel Solonikio from 2003, was a DM winner and this past year he received our award for sustainability. So a lot of the projects that we see here today could in the future be potential prospects for our award.
So in a way, you are scouting to see what could be potential things that
Right.
you could really fund and really help scale up.
Right.
Are there particular projects that you look for?
No, for our award for sustainability, it can relate to health, agriculture, the ecosystem, shelter. So there's no specific realm that it needs to be in. What we like to see are inventions or innovations that are kind of out of the box, that are that haven't necessarily that have been tried successfully, but also are building capacity and are sustainable from both a scientific as well as an economic model.
Okay, so in a way, you're really looking for these out-of-the-box type of solutions for sustainable development.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
All right. And are there particular types of innovations? Are there social processes that you're looking for? What are you looking for? What
So
do you
we've had
support?
it's a fairly new award, the Award for Sustainability. It's 3 years old. So our winners have come from different fields. So last year's winner focused more on public health and medicine. So his was an open source software using mobile technology to collect public health data in African nations. The previous year's winner was Martin Fisher from Kickstart, who produced low-cost irrigation pumps for farmers. So we're not necessarily looking for inventors in a specific space as much as we are inventors who have come up with a process that can be scalable on a larger level and can be adapted.
But by the sounds of it, they're more technical solutions
Right.
rather than social type of solutions.
Right. It should be a scientific,
Okay.
technological.
All right. So you've been walking around down there for a couple of days. Well, I hope not all the time. Otherwise, you'd be very tired, like some of us. But are there particular types of projects that you found really impressive, given you haven't necessarily given an award for climate change, that you could think would be promising?
Right. I mean, some of the projects relating to, reducing global temperatures with trying to manage glaciers and prevent them from melting. That was one interesting project that I saw. Another project had to do with solar harvesting for food, things like that. I think with sustainability, with the Award for Sustainability, and this differs from our larger prize, is that some of these technologies aren't necessarily high-tech in the most definitive sense, that they're more appropriate for the communities that they're meant to serve. So, again, just to give you an example, with last year's winner, Dr. Salonikio, because mobile technology is fairly ubiquitous in Africa, that he was able to capitalize on that, and his software was simple enough that people not in the public health field would be able to utilize effectively.
Okay. Ed, thank you so much, because I think from the participants' point of view, having people who have different types of experiences, different expertise is extremely important. And I really want to thank you for not only joining me here for the last few minutes, but also being with them and sharing your ideas. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Connor is a very busy lady. She does a lot of things, so I'm very pleased you could spare a few minutes of your time and come and join us and share your knowledge with the rest of the world. So,
Well, thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Elena, tell us, what do you do? Because it sounds very exciting from the few minutes that we've had together talking about it.
I am the senior editor of the Stanford Social Innovation Review, which is a publication of the Stanford Graduate School of Business. We present the best ideas in social and environmental change to leaders, nonprofits, socially responsible businesses, and government agencies. So we're modeled on the Harvard Business Review, but our purpose is more about crossing sectors, the sectors of business, nonprofit, and government, to bring the best ideas for how to save the world without breaking the bank.
I like the logo. So how do you decide on what's the best idea?
That's a great question. Like many of the organizations that we cover, we too are a hybrid organization, a hybrid journal. So although we're commercial, we also have sort of a quasi peer review process for many of our features, which means that we have an expert panel of editors who not only vet our submissions, but also go out into the world and get the best ideas from their colleagues. We also take submissions from pretty much anyone. So we're always encouraging people to send in their articles, send in their ideas. And just based on the expertise of our editorial staff, we go through and try to bring the best ideas for our readers.
So do you get many from developing countries in different parts of the world?
Unfortunately we don't, and we would like more. There's so many obstacles for people working in the developing world to get their message out. And as I've been here and worked at other competitions and gone to other conferences, it becomes really apparent to me that we in the wealthier nations of the world really have to reach out and help those people craft their messages for a broader audience. And that's I think about my job as a translator. My background is in cultural psychology, and I see this as a cross-cultural exercise. So I work, in my journal, I mostly work with translating academics and socially responsible business leaders, nonprofit leaders, government leaders to speak to a general audience. But I think there needs to be more from a slightly different direction of working with people who maybe don't have super fancy degrees but are on the ground and really working and really have a lot of local knowledge to figure out how to present that knowledge in a way that we can more readily absorb it and use it.
And that's, to me, climate change is a global issue with local solutions. So if you can find some ways of actually overcoming that, or perhaps the audience who are joining us through the webcast here can make suggestions, that would be a great way of bringing in many parts of the world together.
Yeah, I think we can all agree that climate change is pretty horrible, except for the fact that it is uniting people who otherwise would not share common purposes together, and really forcing us to think differently about how to communicate with each other, which is why I think journals like mine are so important. Venues such as this competition are so important, where we really listen to what people are trying to say and not just impose what we want to hear on them.
Exactly, and that's why I wanted to get your impression about what have you seen down there that perhaps could be brought into a more formal publication mode through a journal like you're running, and then are there some brilliant ideas that you've seen that you think should really reach out to the rest of the world?
I've seen quite a few excellent ideas. I've seen a lot of ideas that have potential, but I'm really struck by this gulf between what I am used to seeing as an editor and as a recovering academic, and how people are talking about their solutions. And I'm struck that they know things I don't know, and I'm really trying to think about how I can map their solutions onto my grid of the way things work. Am I making sense? So, we have this way of structuring arguments and discussing, we have all of these practices that we've learned since we were, 5 years old and went to primary school, not just in the U.S., but in any wealthier country or in the elite institutions of all countries. And we have this kind of formula for how we talk about things, and when other people talk about their solutions and their ways of discussing, and like especially storytelling, nonlinear ways of thinking and talking, at first I'm like, I don't quite understand where you're coming from, but the more I listen, the more I hear, it's like, I never even knew that was a problem. And that's kind of what breaks my heart sometimes, is not only do we not have all the solutions, we don't even know what all the problems are yet. So
in a way, having the development marketplace, even in Washington, D.C., exposing it to now really a minority of the world, which lives in the developed countries, majority lives in developing countries, is a good way of doing a straightforward knowledge exchange, value exchange, and so on. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it definitely has opened my eyes to a lot of issues that I haven't been thinking about, making me realize I need to try harder, even for my magazine, to get stories from these places that aren't already in my pipeline. And there aren't that many pipelines to the popular press from developing countries, but it makes me realize I need to work harder in my job.
So I'm really pleased you were here, and I'm very pleased that you came in with an open mind. I know we valued your contribution to the development marketplace, and we couldn't have done without it. And I'm sure the finalists have learned something from you, and I'm very glad to hear you've learned a lot from them as well.
Well, thank you so much for including me. It's been life-changing, and I really appreciate the opportunity to participate.
Oh, that's excellent. Life-changing. I like that. Joining me now is Fred Onduri. Fred has traveled all the way from Uganda to actually be part of the development marketplace dialogue, I should say. So firstly, thank you, Fred, for coming all the way and joining me here as well.
You're welcome.
So Fred, tell me, what does climate change mean to people in Uganda?
Climate change to people in Uganda means fighting for survival. Because climate change has got a direct impact on the livelihood of the people of Uganda, because it affects the core source of livelihood, that is agriculture. It affects the infrastructure, and it affects the lives of the people directly and the animals when the adverse effects occur.
So animals are extremely important for people in Uganda.
They are extremely important. First of all, the animals are a source of food. They're also used as a source of energy, and they are also used in agricultural tilling of the land. So when there's an adverse impact on the animals, on their lives and on their health, definitely there is some problem in terms of productivity in the agricultural sector. The malnutrition comes in, and of course, not to forget about the animal tracking, which contributes a lot to the energy which is used in various aspects.
So in many ways, climate change really affects so many different parts of people's lives in Uganda.
Yeah, it affects many people, many sectors. For example, in agriculture, in terms of agriculture, it destroys the crops, and it can lead to food insecurity. And for the pastoralists, it can even lead to environmental insecurity because in the western and the northeastern part of Uganda, when there's a long drought, there's an attempt by the pastoralists to invade other nearing districts, and it results into death of animals, death of human beings, and so on. So it is quite a crucial issue. Yeah.
So Fred, you actually work in the Ugandan government.
Yes, please.
What do you do?
I am Assistant Commissioner in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, in charge of policy and planning. So I head the policy and planning unit. I also carry out policy analysis, looking at the various government policies, sectoral, and also the national policies, and try to see its impact on the mandate of my Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
So in a way, you are the equivalent counterpart for many of my colleagues here in the World Bank.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, with policy and planning. So over the last few days, you've been in Washington, D.C. I know it's turned to be winter and so on, but you've really focused on adaptation to climate change and looking at the finalists in there. What are some of the ideas that you saw that you think are particularly useful from your perspective?
First of all, I think the development marketplace has opened my eyes as a chair of the least developed countries expert group, or that is an advisory sort of body which for the LDCs in their process of the NAPA program of action.
So we've got so many acronyms, so hold it. So yeah. LDC is
least developed countries.
Okay, and NAPA?
NAPA is National Adaptation Program of Action.
Okay.
It's a document which they use, the least developed countries are supposed to produce, and it incorporates all their adaptation proposals that could help them overcome the adverse effects of climate change.
And I'm sorry, you were saying that it opened up your eyes?
It opened up my eyes because in the NAPA documents, there are proposals that are quite very related to the proposals which I have seen here by the finalists. There are 100 proposals that are quite related to some of the proposals that already, or the priorities that are already indicated in the NAPA documents by the least developed countries.
So how do you think we can link up some of the ideas that are there in the finalists with the NAPA document that you've developed a few years ago?
Yeah, I think first of all, I would say in the NAPA process, there's room for reviewing the NAPAs and try to make some changes. But then I see a lot of difficulties to transport the new proposals here into the NAPA proposals, because the entry point is not there. But I think what I would advocate for is to encourage the finalists here to link with their governments at home to ensure that their proposals, which are going to be funded under the DM arrangement, are included in the national plan, and therefore in that way it can directly be incorporated in the national program and becomes a NAPA.
Okay. Is it possible for some of the finalists perhaps to link with some of the communities directly and do a knowledge exchange?
Yeah, I think it's quite important, and there's a possibility because the finalists have got programs which they are supposed to implement within the communities. And if they are going to implement within the communities, they have got to identify enabling environment, and that one of the enabling environment is trying to at least find the consent of the community to consult whether it is applicable in their area, and that there's a need for dialogue and agreement.
Okay, so my final question, given that it's almost a week of your time plus the travel on top of it, if you were invited again, would you come? Did you find it exciting enough to think about coming?
I think this is a very exciting experience, and I think any person would really like to come here and experience what is happening here. And after testing, I'm like a crocodile that has tasted blood, and once it has tasted blood, it wants to eat more of the human being. So definitely, I would like to come back here.
Well, hopefully not me, but thank you very much, Fred, for joining us.
Thank you.
Evelyn has been able to join us just now. So Evelyn, tell me a little bit about what you do.
Well, I'm the Executive Director of International Funders for Indigenous Peoples, which is an association, a membership of donors that supports Indigenous projects globally.
And do you deal with climate change adaptation?
Yes. What we do is we have held many sessions bringing together Indigenous leaders from all around the world on how they're adapting to climate change, and also donors that are funding these projects. And we do this at major donors conferences to encourage more donors to support these kind of projects.
What are some particular ways that Indigenous people that you work with are in fact adapting to climate change?
Well, one way is creating new varieties that are more drought resistant. Because of in some areas that there are some droughts. Other ways, building structures that are more traditional in trying to against floods. That's another way. So there's a variety of ways.
And you've spent the last 2.5 days here around the World Bank building looking at the development marketplace and all the finalists that have got together. What are some ideas that you found really fascinating and interesting?
Well, it was an incredible experience, and I do want to thank Development Marketplace for inviting me. What I was really happy to see that there was a theme on specifically Indigenous adaptation. And I really enjoyed specifically the ones that brought Indigenous communities together to talk about their traditional knowledge. Because there is a need for more funds to find out exactly how Indigenous peoples are adapting. So this is a continuing process.
And it's exciting to actually see a fairly huge number that were up there, so I agree with you. A last point for you, in terms of really using some of the ideas that you've seen upstairs and with the development marketplace finalists, how do you think they can be taken forward within your own work, and how can they be used within the Indigenous communities that you work with?
Well, I think these were 100 finalists from 1,700 proposals. So I think they definitely were very innovative. If successful, which I'm guessing that most of them will be successful, and I'm hoping that DM will track them, they could be great case studies and best practices on the future on how we adapt to the climate crisis that's taking place. As for my network of donors, I'm diligently going through, looking at some really critical proposals that were not supported, unfortunately, because we had only limited funds, but also to encourage other donors that would possibly support some of these great innovative ideas.
Evelyn, thank you very much for your time, not just for this interview, but also for the critical role that you've played in getting the finalists into the winning teams. So thank you very much, Evelyn.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And Botha, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon, and hoping that you can share some of the knowledge that you have, especially on technology, with the rest of the world. So tell me what you do that's helpful to climate adaptation.
So I work with an organization called Indegenous, and we're a nonprofit social enterprise that focuses on bringing the tools of ICT to the people who need it the most, communities and organizations in the developing world. And we've looked at the beginning at the tools that would be appropriate, the ICT tools, so that is the computers, the hardware, the software, the connectivity, and the power that would work in a place like Africa. And we found that there weren't that many tools. There are computers, but they're very energy aggressive. They use a lot of power. People have to buy very dirty, expensive diesel or gasoline generators and run them continuously to have power for their computers. So we designed appropriate computers that use only 10% of the electricity of a normal computer. So in that way, these organizations can use clean, renewable energies like solar and wind to power their computers.
So is that what a social entrepreneur does? We've heard that word a lot this week, and I just wondered if you can say what you think it means.
So I don't know the exact definition of social entrepreneur that you would find in a dictionary, but we look at social entrepreneurship as that we are an NGO, but we act like a business. And we're also working with businesses, so we're trying to empower organizations and companies to be able to grow their business. And we feel that their business and ours has the same goal, to increase those who have ICT in rural parts of Africa and the developing world.
And tell me again, what does ICT stand for?
So it would be Information and Communication Technologies is ICT.
Okay, so computers, cell phones, radios.
Yes, the full gamut. So ICT, in fact, we look at ICT as encompassing almost anything any data that an electron moves. So you can look at everything from very, if you will, old school radio, so FM radio, all the way up to the newest digital phones or MP3 players or these kind of cutting edge tools. Really, you have to look at what's appropriate, not what's shiny or flashy or new.
So in a way, it's really communicating even some of the ideas that these people have with other communities within them. ICT can play a huge role in that. Is that right?
We look at the main underlying function of ICT is the communication, right? It's information and communication technologies,
right,
not technologies that happen to do information and communication. So really, yes, the underlying and largest bonus of ICTs is the ability to have people communicate. So that a small farm holder in Guatemala could communicate with somebody in Argentina about best practices for their community and learn from each other and grow in that way. Or, better yet, someone in a rural part of Africa with a cell phone communicating with somebody in the urban center around how to improve their own livelihood.
And do they have to be low cost, or are they generally high cost for developing countries in terms of the, say, amount of income that they have?
Information and communication technologies are relative in cost to their owners. So some are very expensive relative to their owners, and some are cheap. A great example is a cell phone. You can have a very expensive iPhone, which is top of the line and even hurts my budget, or you could have a very, very cheap $10 Nokia cell phone that you buy locally in a market. And to someone earning $1 a day, that is an expensive purchase. But to someone who's earning more, it's a very cheap purchase. So it's all really relative to the buyer and to the user.
So it's really a function and not the tool itself that's important.
True, true. It's very interesting. Some people talk about ICT being a very expensive thing for underserved people to buy. I really look at it in the other way. They are making a conscious decision that communication is very valuable to them, and they're willing to pay for communication. I like to ask people who think that's an overarching cost to look at their own bills. Every year when I do my taxes, I realize that I pay more for my cell phone every month than I pay for my heat, my electricity, my water, and someday I hope it doesn't eclipse my mortgage, but it could actually happen.
I want to ask you how much time you spend on your cell phone, but when you've been walking around here, I'm sure people have asked you questions. Give us some examples of the kind of questions they've raised about communication in terms of climate adaptation, and what has been your response to them?
I think it's really interesting in the way people are using ICTs to find out about their own climate and the impact of changes in that climate. When I look around at these exhibits, I see many people who are using satellite data. They're using topographical data that they're either obtaining from the internet, or actually they're going out and using a GPS or some other handheld tool to find out what's happening in their area, in their very community. In fact, I think one of my favorites is they have a water bottle and bell system. So they used satellite data to figure out where rainwater could cause a landslide, and then they put water bottles into the soil, and as the water bottles fill, they know that there's too much water in the soil and there's a danger of landslide. So then they use church bells to be able to communicate that data out. So it's very interesting to me here, we're mixing very modern satellite communication technology with church bells.
Yes.
Something that's been going on since, well, the dawn of time, pretty much.
So that's pretty innovative, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So thank you, Valerie, for joining us. This has been an informative session, and I hope that there are loads of people out there that can fill me in on my ignorance that I might have shown on ICT. So thank you, and I hope we'll see each other again.
Has supported the development marketplace for many years. This initiative has produced a steady pipeline of ideas for development projects. Many of these ideas were picked up by international development agencies and scaled up. To see these small innovative undertakings grow and blossom is very impressive, and it proves the value of the development marketplace and its projects. Last year, for example, they included the design of renewable energy powered milk coolers for use by Uganda farmers, or the production of biofuel from indigenous non-edible nuts in Tanzania. There is no doubt innovation and creativity is the key of its success. The GF has also been built on those cornerstones. In fact, I see the development marketplace as a natural extension of our long-standing experience involving civil society in achieving global environmental benefits. The small grant program is one example that is well known and successful, and the development marketplace carries this concept one step further. This is particularly true with this year's theme of adaptation, where the GF was the first global agency to invest in pilot and demonstration projects on the ground that help communities to cope with the negative effects of climate change. The sad fact is that those least responsible for global warming are the ones most likely to suffer with growing threats to water and food security, agricultural production, and public health. To support these communities, the GF has mobilized $400 million over 18 years for adaptation to climate change. As the financial mechanism of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the GF managed the Least Developed Country Fund and the Special Climate Change Fund. The LDCF addresses the special needs of least developed countries under the Climate Convention. The fund's top priority is to finance the preparation and the implementation of national adaptation programs of actions, which have become key government statements of adaptation needs. The SCCF finances activities, programs, and measures that are complementary to those funded by resources from the GF Trust Fund. Both of these funds integrate adaptation measures into development practices. In addition, the GF provides interim secretariat services to the Kyoto Protocol Adaptation Fund Board. The board is the operating entity of the Adaptation Fund. The board has recently approved the guidelines that will allow developing countries to access the resources of the fund directly. In that regard, we are assisting the board with the accreditation of the national implementing entities of developing countries to start reviewing projects next year. Earlier this year, the monetization program of carbon credits has been launched, and the fund is now running with its own resources. GF projects have always been innovative. They have a catalytic force for change, helping to deepen decision makers' understanding of how to develop an adaptation measures into development sectors. That is why the GF and the development marketplace are such a good match. It's innovation at all levels. In this year's competition, 100 innovative grassroots ideas to save the planet have been selected out of 1,700 applications, and I am delighted that the GF can continue to provide local support for the global good.
me is Valerie Marino. She's been here for the last 3 days looking at the finalists of the development marketplace. Welcome, Valeria, and it's an honor to have you here. Tell us a little bit about what you do.
Well, I work for Ashoka, which is an organization that is for the last 30 years selecting and supporting the best social entrepreneurs in the world in helping develop the citizen sector. So I was here supporting you in the process of selecting the winners for the marketplace, and thank you very much for inviting me. It's been a pleasure.
Nice. Pleasure is ours because you played an important role in actually getting the finalists to be in the winning pool. So, Valeria, did you see some social entrepreneurs that you were very impressed by?
I was very impressed for a great number of people that participated in the marketplace. The group that I particularly had to look at were innovations and ideas coming from indigenous groups from different places in the world, and especially Latin America. And I was very impressed at the holistic approach and the capacity that had been put into thinking about these very innovative solutions for social problems related to adaptation to climate change. And I think this is a very good space to be able not only to see these ideas individually, but also to allow the people working in the ground to kind of meet each other and cross-fertilize their ideas. And I think there was a lot of that going on yesterday in the marketplace.
And it's really important in terms of the interaction amongst themselves, but also with you, because being a Spanish speaker, you can in fact talk to them directly. Is that right?
Oh, yes, absolutely. In the translation. And in fact, I had known in different stages in my life some of them. So it was interesting to kind of find friends again and some new people that I hope to become friends with, but also thinking about how can Ashoka collaborate with some of them and how we can collaborate with the World Bank in the future through the marketplace to try to match some of your winners with maybe Ashoka fellows, and how to create spaces for collaboration among them, because I think these days it's so important to get out of your own box and to think about how I improve the idea, the project that I am implementing through the feedback and the ideas of others. So I think that is something that I was thinking that it would be very good for us.
And I think that's an excellent idea, because the development marketplace, as you know, is partnership. So having somebody like Ashoka coming in as partners would be an excellent way of keeping them as a community of practice. So excellent idea.
Absolutely.
So if there was another development marketplace and you were partnering with, what do you see as a major challenge that you think really needs social entrepreneurs and involvement from communities in social entrepreneurs from?
I mean, what we were saying in the conversation this morning and yesterday is that Ashoka is a people-centric organization, so we pay a lot of attention not only to the idea and the project itself, but the characteristics of the person. And I think maybe this is something which Ashoka can contribute to the marketplace thinking and methodology, is how on top of looking at the projects and proposals that are sent to you and the calendars for implementation and the budgets, you also look at the leadership capacity of the people behind the ideas to actually be successful. And I think this is something that we could bring to the conversation.
Another excellent idea from a social entrepreneur organization. But of course, I mean, more importantly, you're putting a human face on a problem that's reaching a crisis level for many people in the world. So thank you very much again for your time, Valeria. Thank you as well for spending the last few days here.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Hello, we are here now with two of the main activists who have been behind the scenes of the development marketplace, putting it all together. It's Theresa Bradley, to my immediate left, who is the team leader of the marketplace, and we have Edith Wilson, who is the communication strategist. And I'd like to pick up on some of the Twitter messages that we have received and ask the team whether they can answer that. One question we got was, what is the competition intended to achieve, and will the results of the competition solve the problems of climate change?
Let me start. What we're trying to do here is to gather and scan some of the most innovative new ideas to solve a very important pressing problem for the world, adapting to climate change. We know it's there, and we need to figure out how we're going to adapt and improve people's lives in that very challenging context. And we've asked the world to come up with the best ideas on how to solve this really important problem. And you see here in the marketplace what we have identified as 100 of some of the best ideas out there. And we would like to scan them and incubate them and nurture them so that these ideas can be scaled up and have a really big development impact.
And I'd like to take the second part of the question, which is this going to solve climate change? In a way, yes, it will help us, and it might help us significantly. The reason we called it 100 Ideas to Save the Planet is that this symbolizes that in order to deal and manage these changes that are happening with the world's climate, we need not 100 ideas, we need thousands of ideas. And they are out there, they're in communities all over the world, rich countries, poor countries, people know things, people are doing things, and we were trying with this competition to show how much we have to respect those ideas and find them. And as Theresa was saying, then we have to both support them where they are, but identify the important ones, scale them up, and get them to, maybe there's a community that knows something in Brazil that would be helpful to a community in China. So the role of some of the partner organizations is to make sure that happens too. And I would say, given climate changes, that it happens in real time, as fast as we know how to do it and as well as we know how to do it.
Over the last 3 days, we're in the third day today with the development marketplace. What was the most exciting moment that you can think of, since Tuesday when the competition started?
Well, I just love every year when we see the finalists actually arriving here, because it's taken a long time to get to that, and to see them coming to the marketplace with their ideas, putting everything up, starting to meet each other, you start to get the energy of all these innovators pulled together, and there's just nothing like that.
For me, it was what happened with these flip camera technology. I didn't know what one of these was 3 weeks ago, and we found a remark that said we should do informal video, and we decided to scale it up because communication is an innovation. It's not just something that supports innovation. And so we gave out on the whole floor of the event, we loaned these little video devices out to people. And we last night posted 110 videos of our finalists and their ideas to YouTube in the space of 3 days. And everybody did it together. Finalists interviewed finalists. We all interviewed finalists. I have colleagues who came and did things in all sorts of languages. And this is just this little revolution for us. And that to me was really wonderful.
Cool. Very cool, yeah. So we encourage everybody to look at the YouTube channel of the World Bank and see the short videos that we did of each of the
Actually,
finalists.
it's Development Marketplace 2009. We have our own channel.
So last question. The competition will end tomorrow, and there will be 25 winners about.
We'll see.
So what will happen next with these winners?
We can't say too much because
we
would get in some. But what can we say, Theresa?
Well, I mean
because it's a secret until tomorrow.
Well, they get the $200,000, and
or up to
$200,000. They ask for a range of funds, and so we will empower them with these resources, but we will also give them partnerships, and we will give them bank resources of our supervision to help them implement their ideas, to make the connections, the links, to empower them with their ideas, so that that it starts small, but by the end of the 2 years after they're done implementation, they're really ready to flourish and to grow.
And we have all these partners who are working with us who have ideas, both the the organizations like the Global Environmental Facility and EFAD who've supported it, but we have Ashoka, we have the Stanford Social Innovation Group, we have the SEED Initiative, help me here. Well, there are so many who've come today, and they come every year, and what they offer to do, almost without our asking, is to help us help all of the, not just the winners, but the finalists. So there'll be a whole social networking and social innovation process that doesn't just stop tomorrow. It actually just starts tomorrow.
And what will happen to those who have not won? We had about 100 participants, 100 finalists, 25 will win. So what's happening with the 75? Will we be able to provide some kind of support or follow-up to them as well?
Yeah, so what Edie just said in terms of the social networking and the support structure that we are creating, and we're building just stronger foundations for this. This is open to all the finalists, not to the winners. And so we really think, going back to my first comment about how exciting it is to get everyone together, this week of them pulled together is just the start of them having a larger support system to share knowledge, to share ideas, and to help each other along their way. And the development marketplace is a pretty tough competition.
Yeah. How many entries this year?
1,700. And we got down to 125 or so will win.
Wow.
So when they get to this point where they have, they're one of the 100, they actually often brand themselves that I am a DM finalist. So it's actually quite an accomplishment unto itself. And it does actually help them signal to other funders and other partners that they have really solid, good ideas worth consideration. And that helps them.
It's really a development idol competition.
It is. It is. It's like, that's exactly, the world's caught up, and now we need some music for next year. We're thinking about that already, but we've been doing this now as a whole consortium around Development Marketplace this is the 9th global competition. We've been doing the whole program for 10 years. It's not just this event, it's a whole series of things that we do. We've given out how much money, Theresa?
Over $15 million.
15 million.
50.
Over $50 million in a series of 1,000 small grants to recognize ideas that needed to grow. And so we've learned a lot. We've learned so much from all of the people who participated over the years. I have been hearing all these stories about projects, from a couple of years ago that are now bigger and better, and they're teaching us. We've had some of them here today telling us about what they think we could do even better. So it's kind of organic. And it's definitely on social media. I just want to say I hope that people who are that they're watching, I'm glad we had the Twitter. We think that the finalists are going to link in and have their own space. They're having a debate right now between Facebook and LinkedIn, so if anybody out there has a perspective about what would be the best platform for this kind of an event to use, please, let us know, Twitter, or send us a message. And definitely go to YouTube. You're going to see all sorts of things there, thanks to the wonders of some of this new technology.
Excellent. Thank you very, very much, Theresa and Edith, for joining us up here. Thank you. All right.
Valerie da Costa is our last guest this afternoon. Welcome, Valerie, and it's a pleasure to have you here. So tell us, what do you do, Valerie?
I am the program manager of a program here at the World Bank called Infodev, which stands for Information for Development. It looks at the link between information and access to technology as a tool for sustainable development.
And how long have you been doing that?
This is now my third year.
In doing Infodev, or
Yeah.
Infodev has existed for 3 years?
Infodev has existed since, I think, the early 90s, but it's my third year doing the job.
So what are the main types of technologies you actually use in terms of getting information for development?
It's an interesting question. We find that the technologies that are becoming much more prevalent and predominant include anything that's essentially internet-based, because the network is so open and so inclusive that essentially anyone who wants to be part of a community or part of a network could quite easily do that. The other technology that I would even describe as maybe even being somewhat disruptive in its force and its power is mobile communications technology. So we're now upwards on 4 billion mobile phones in the world. And one of the ways that we like to try to describe the mobile platform is the single largest delivery platform for any sort of development service or delivery. It is that big, it is that pervasive. And the largest rate of growth is happening in the developing world, not in the developed world.
Okay. Give us some examples of the kind of things that you've been able to do with, say, the mobile platforms.
One of the things I think we're looking at very closely, which is of particular interest to me, is the fact that as the rate of mobile subscribers in the world goes up, we're not finding a commensurate rate of growth in the amount of content that's available. So giving a farmer a mobile phone and saying, now please use this, is very, very important. But how he uses it, or how a villager uses it, or how a doctor in a remote area uses a mobile phone, is a content or an applications related issue. And what we are finding is that the rate of growth in content that is locally relevant, locally applicable, isn't growing as fast. So one of the exciting projects that Infodev will be launching in the coming year is the launch of close to 3 or up to 3 mobile applications laboratories. The first one will be in Africa, and from there we'll scale out. And the aim is to incubate entrepreneurs, startups, SMEs that are interested to use the mobile platform to make a business in content delivery. Now, you're seeing that happen in an explosive way here in the States. Just look at an iPhone, the amount of applications that are available. We want to replicate that sort of success, but in a uniquely African context, Asian context, Latin American context. So that'll be coming up.
Okay. So, we've done a webcast yesterday based on some of the technical content on climate adaptation, and we had a message from one of the viewers that said, how do people in developing countries actually get hold of these type of simple technologies? How do they get access to the information? And then obviously the how-to. So what would your response be to that?
There's going to be a persistent issue of access, and access to connectivity, access to a device or a network which allows you to communicate continues to be an issue. But it's fast becoming an issue for rural and remote areas. I think there's got to be a recognition of the good news. And the good news is that these networks and services are spreading very, very quickly. And as they spread, the per unit cost is going down. So you can get a very, very cost-effective and affordable mobile phone subscription service today in many developing parts of the world. And how you use it is up to you. One of the most revolutionary things which I think affected the mobile sector is pay-per-use. So prepaid cards to allow you to use the mobile phone when you need it and for the length of time that you need it.
Okay, so let's now turn to the development marketplace. Have you had much of a chance of walking around here, given that you're a busy person doing all these things? And what are some of, and if you have, what are some of the exciting ideas that you have seen?
I loved it. I was a juror yesterday, Habiba, which was wonderful, and thank you for the invitation. So I went around to speak to a number of the participants here and to help to grade them. And I found myself really wanting to give everyone an award because what strikes me the most about DM this year is, first of all, using the issue or tackling the issue of climate change adaptation is very, very important. So from each booth that I went to, I found that the solutions that were being proposed were critical for the growth of communities, particularly for indigenous peoples. But I think the two other things that really struck me was how innovative they were in the use and application of technology, which is the best part of technology is putting it in the hands of the user. Mm-hmm. The best part is not sitting in a lab with a white coat and deciding what's best for the user. And so that's what you saw demonstrated here. And the second thing I thought was how tenacious these applicants were. To make it this far, to me, is just an amazing thing. So I really celebrated that yesterday.
Yeah, and I think your words, they really are in some ways winners for having got here, having got so far.
Yeah.
And the atmosphere in there is really exciting.
Yeah.
So it's good that you could share that. As you know, adaptation to climate change is a passion of mine.
Yeah.
So I've been very fortunate that we've been able to do something like this and then get people with very different backgrounds to in fact come in and be jurors, be partners, be part of this whole process. But what's really exciting is through ICTs, we've also been able to share this with the rest of the world. So we've had this webcast, we've got a lot of e-discussions going, some blogs going. People are tweeting, if that's the right terminology.
Yeah.
And it's really been fascinating. So I really want to thank all our communication team and all our partners like you in being available for interview and sharing some of the excitement with the rest of the world. And thank you for coming, Valerie.
Thank you so much, Habiba.
Concludes our live webcast from the Development Marketplace at the World Bank in Washington, D.C. We thank you very, very much for joining us, and I hope you had an interesting time watching and listening to our interviews. We will come back tomorrow morning, and as you see, the development practitioners, the finalists here around me are all very, very nervous. The judges have made their rounds, and the decisions are probably already made, but they will only be announced tomorrow. So join us tomorrow at around 9:30 Eastern Standard Time, where we will have a live connection to the final ceremony, where you will meet all the final winners of the Development Marketplace 2009. Join us tomorrow. Thanks and bye-bye.